I'm Ann Gillespie, Senior Associate Rector in charge of Worship and Pastoral Care at Christ Church in Alexandria, Virginia.
And I'm Bill Roberts, Professor of Church Music at Virginia Theological Seminary.
Let's face it, there is often conflict between clergy and musicians. This creates a poor work environment and can have a drastic effect on worship.
But conflict is a normal part of any relationship. The quicker we work through the issues, the easier we can create worship that works.
We have developed 3 topics for discussion among clergy and musicians. After each section, there will be a place for you to stop the DVD and engage each other in conversation.
Some of these issues are very sensitive.
But if we want to grow in collaborative ministry, they're worth talking about.
Issues of power. Let's take a look at the relationship of clergy and musician. The first thing we have to acknowledge is that there is a difference in power. Clergy are usually the boss. They have the power to fire the musician. That's a lot of power. But a musician who has been in the position for many years often has a strong following, especially among the choir. This creates a power dynamic that can lead to conflict.
So if the musician has been in place for a long time and a new clergy person arrives in the congregation, one of the first things the clergy might notice is how much power the musician has.
Right, but it's not only true with new clergy and a veteran musician. If you want to know where the power is located in the parish, just notice which groups meet most often.
So since a choir meets 2 or 3 times a week.
Exactly. There's a lot of power vested in the choir.
And would it pertain to other groups as well, like the altar guild?
You'd better believe it.
I sometimes tell my seminary students that if the choir or the altar guild turn against you, get your resume in order, you're about to move.
Let's hope it doesn't get that bad.
Well, how can we treat each other with compassion and respect, given the differences in power?
Well, it seems to me we need to be open about the power differences and how we handle them. Like it or not, there are going to be times when I need to be the boss. Now, I try not to let that get in the way of our collaboration.
I've experienced that when collaboration breaks down, this leads to micromanaging, ultimatums, unilateral decisions. Those are the times when something is no longer open to debate.
Well, that's not helpful.
I have to admit that even though I'm not the boss in this relationship, there are still times when I draw a line in the sand as well.
Really?
And this often happens, it seems to me, when the issue is one of taste. I tell my seminary students that selecting music based on what I personally like is the lowest possible motivation. There need to be other, more objective reasons for selecting music for an occasion.
Yes, and as author Marva Dawn says, when it comes to taste, power always wins. It seems to me that what we need to say about this is that the person who has power rarely realizes they have it.
And people who are subject to power are always aware of it.
Now, it's your turn to talk. Describe ways in which you have power. Describe ways in which your colleague has power that makes you uncomfortable. How is power handled responsibly? How does your colleague's power affect your ability to do your work? As an optional activity, read, sing, and discuss stanza 4 of Will You Come and Follow Me, hymn 757, in Wonder, Love, and Praise. Go on, talk to each other. We'll still be here when you're done. Shared pastoral ministry. The pastoral role is pretty clearly laid out for clergy. For musicians, the pastoral part of the job is not always specified.
Most of the really good musicians I have worked with are pastors in every sense of the word.
True, but there are musicians that have never really considered their pastoral role.
That's like saying clergy have no responsibility for music. What really energizes me is when a musician is pastor not only to the choir, but to the entire congregation.
It took some time before I saw myself as a pastor. I'll give you an example. In my first church, there was a member of the congregation who had been my music professor and had also had an illustrious career as a performer.
So how did that influence your choices?
Well, I wanted her to see me as the erudite musician she had trained me to be.
Sounds like you thought she was the only parishioner in the room.
Exactly.
So now, what would you do differently?
Well, I would be very conscious of who was in my congregation and how they might respond to music. As a pastor, I would be far more conscious of the liturgical needs of the service. And third, I would not be selecting music based on my own taste, but would consider the musical tastes of the people I serve. This can be a real balancing act, though, because I don't want to cater exclusively to their tastes either.
That's being pastoral to the whole congregation.
But what happens when somebody comes to me with a personal need?
Well, it's natural that somebody's going to come to you for help because you spend so much time together in ministry. Here are a few basics of pastoral care. Be a good listener and realize you don't have to fix the problem. Then decide if they need professional help. Confidentiality is of utmost importance, and so is prayer. What they probably need most is for you to listen.
Well, what if I think the issue is beyond my capacity?
Well, you may need to refer them to a clergy person.
But wouldn't that be breaking confidence?
Well, it doesn't break a confidence if you urge them to go to the clergy directly, or if you get their permission to speak to the clergy on their behalf. Even clergy refer people to professionals all the time.
That's good to hear.
All right, it's your turn to talk again. How did you come to see yourself as a pastor? How do you discern whether a pastoral situation is within your capabilities or whether you need to refer to someone with specific training? Musicians, in what ways do you serve as a pastor to your congregation? When you choose music for worship, whose needs are you trying to meet? As an optional activity, read, sing, and discuss "There is a Balm in Gilead." Hymn 203 in Lift Every Voice and Sing 2. Take your time. We'll be right here. Healthy collaborations. How can clergy and musicians collaborate in a healthy way, given these power dynamics, as well as their shared pastoral responsibilities?
An important step for any church musician is to know yourself, your values, your vision for music in the parish, and how you like to communicate.
Well, of course, the same applies to clergy.
For instance, I make most of my decisions through conversations, and I gather information by how I feel, and I usually come to a decision pretty slowly.
Well, I like to make decisions quickly because there are so many tasks that need to be taken care of. But we've always been able to work well because we know what to expect from each other, and I try not to push you to make a decision too quickly.
One of the most important aspects of communicating with each other is sharing our visions for music and worship.
What if these visions are different? Here's a question for you, Bill. Would you consider yourself a conservator or an agent of change?
That's a great question. I'm not sure because I feel I'm both.
Well, actually, everyone is. But I think it's important for clergy musician teams to figure out where they are on the spectrum of conservator change agent.
Let's take a look at the conservator change agent spectrum. A conservator is someone who is invested in maintaining more traditional styles of music and liturgy. Their highest value might be preserving the church's classical heritage. An agent of change is someone who values innovation. Their priorities might include new styles of music and worship, or new settings of traditional music. Where you are on the spectrum affects what music you feel is best for worship.
For example, the musician I work with probably considers his ideal to be St. Thomas Fifth Avenue, the quintessential English cathedral style of music. Some of the most exuberant worship I have experienced is at St. Gregory of Nyssa in San Francisco, where they write their own prayers and dance around the altar. The worship we designed together as a team marries the best of both conservator and change agent, and is appropriate to the church we serve, which is somewhere in between.
Remember, any relationship requires work and compromise. Following some key principles will allow all of your relationships to thrive. Respect others' points of view. Be honest. And most of all, establish trust. There are certainly lots of barriers to trust. Personal insecurity, secrecy, and inadequate communication can all hinder any relationship. Trust is built over time by getting to know each other, letting go of turf issues, and praying together. Even small things, like going to functions that don't have anything to do with church. If you follow these principles, you can improve your working relationship.
Daring to have these courageous conversations is vital. You know, we're all works in progress, and being able to admit that we might be wrong is essential.
Even the most healthy and productive relationships will come up against a rub. Conflict is normal, whether it's with your colleague, a friend, a spouse, or a partner.
Well, let's say you've had a good working relationship. You've both articulated your visions, and things have been going along swimmingly. Then maybe one day your clergy colleague tells you that he wants the congregation to sing Stand Up for Jesus" as the song of praise every Sunday in Epiphany. But you, the musician, want the Gloria by William Matthias.
When these conflicts happen, the one who doesn't get his or her way often goes off and has one of those parking lot conversations.
Or starts doing a little poll taking, maybe in the choir room. You know what I'm talking about.
When a conflict occurs and this kind of negative behavior builds up, that's where the relationship can get off track. The healthy way of dealing with conflicts is to go back as soon as possible and try to gather more information.
If you are the musician, maybe try to understand what the clergy has in mind with this hymn.
If you're the clergy, maybe you could find out why the musician feels it's inappropriate.
By respecting the other person's point of view, you come away from the disagreement with an honest "we."
The relationship and the entire congregation benefit.
Okay, one more time. Let's talk this through. What is your preferred method of communication? Email? Phone? Face-to-face? Where do you fit on the conservator change agent spectrum? Articulate to your colleague your values for liturgy and music. What is the best way for someone to approach you about a conflict? As an optional activity, read, sing, and discuss stanza 4 of When Christ Was Lifted from the Earth, hymn 603 in hymnal 1982. Go ahead and talk it out. This is the last set of questions.
If you've made it this far, good for you. How's this for a charge to you both? Musicians, don't talk to other musicians about your issues with clergy. Talk to your clergy.
Clergy, don't talk to other clergy about issues with your musician. Talk to your musician. Here's a vision that will enrich the church. Clergy and musicians as partners in mission.
Creating worship that works.